So we're gonna talk today about Shlach Lecha. And my way of looking at it this week, which those of you might have seen if you looked at the source sheet beforehand, is to think about how do we see and how do we choose what to see, and kind of how do we use our sight to interact with the world. I got the whole idea for this vision of this from Rabbi Matt Berkowitz, who teaches at JTS in Israel. Always love what he has to say. He's also an amazing artist, so I have to give him credit for sparking this idea for me. So yeah, just really thinking about how do we use our vision, and can our vision lead us astray, or can our vision help us sort of realize the wonderful things in the world? And this parsha really hits on both points. So just to give a summary of the parsha, because it's important, because again, like I have done the last few weeks, we're going to zoom in on sort of two psukim, on two verses, and sort of see where they take us from there. So this is the parsha where we talk about the spies. So they're getting close to the land of Israel. Moses decides to send some spies, one from each tribe, to just be lookouts, see what's the story with this new land, how are the people, what are the crops like, what's going on. So they go and they say it's a land full of milk and honey, very beautiful. And 10 of them say, but the people are like giants and we look like grasshoppers, we shouldn't go, don't do it. They kind of panic, and Caleb and Joshua say we should go in anyway, we'll be fine. And the people believe the 10 spies who speak negatively about everything, and then God says, this is like another kvetchy parsha, as a lot of the book of Numbers is, and God says, I'm kind of done with this people, you're all going to die off before we get to the land of Israel, you don't deserve to go, except for Joshua and Caleb. They're the only two who are allowed to go in. So that's what happens with the spies, and like a lot of the book of Numbers, that's the main story, and then there's all these little stories thrown in. So we end the parsha talking about tzitzit and why we wear tzitzit on the corner of our garments. It's really just like a paragraph thrown in at the end. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about is what do these two stories have to do with each other and what's going on. So that's the little intro. And just as a reminder of how I like to do these things, I want these texts to speak to you personally. I've added in a bunch of personal questions as we go, but sort of feel free to speak about how these texts are hitting you. And just like I did last time, I love that there are people who talk a lot, and I always want to make sure that people who aren't talking get a chance to. So I might call on you and just ask if you have anything to say if you haven't been speaking, and feel free to say, I still have nothing to say, but I want to at least give you the chance.
And no politics, no politics.
Right, I'm trying to stay away from politics. Or at least I would say you could talk politics, but speak for yourself. Don't speak for groups. That's yes. Okay. So unless there's any questions on the intro or the parsha, look to see if anyone's raising their hand, then Diane, was that a hand or was that a scratch?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, no problem. All right, so it looks like no one has anything to say before then, so I'll start sharing my screen and we'll take a look. So pull up your source sheets if you printed it in advance. And we'll get started. All right, that is the wrong window. Let's pull up the right one. There we go. Okay, so yeah, so I called this, what do we choose to see? How does our vision of the world impact us and the people around us? So we're gonna look, again, zooming in on two verses. And you will see that sight is a reoccurring theme in this week's parsha. So urei tem, you'll see the word in Hebrew, and they saw, and they will see. Appears in both of these verses, but it appears a lot of other times in the parsha. So seeing and looking.
We're not getting the text.
We don't
getting
see it.
your Zoom 50 page.
We don't
Really?
see the text.
I'm not getting the text either.
All right, so hold on, let's close this and let's try again. Let's stop share and I'll start again. All right, I don't know why it's giving me a hard time. Thank you for telling me. Let's see if we can make it happier now. All right, let's try again. Sorry about that.
Bless you. Thank you. Bless you.
Why is it giving me a hard time? This is very weird. This has never happened to me before, where it hasn't worked at all. All right, let's try this. Tell me, can you see it now?
There
Yes.
it is.
All right, excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you for telling me on my screen it was showing up. I don't know what was going on. So, all right, we'll Zoom glitches, they happen. Luckily, they haven't happened so much for us so far, so we'll just roll with it. Okay, great. So, start again. So, So we're looking at Urei Item. You'll see the word I bolded in Hebrew appears a bunch of times in this parsha. And like I've said before, if a Torah repeats a word a bunch of times, in Hebrew it's called a milah mancha. In English, it's kind of a word, the repetitive word, and it basically is the Torah saying, like, highlighting for us, right? It's kind of like a flashing light saying, look here, something interesting is happening. So this is the very beginning of the parsha when we're talking about the spies. We're going to look at that pasuk, and the very end of the parsha looking at the tzitzit. So we're just going to look at the verses at first, and then I'd love to hear what you have to say, you know, kind of as I like to say, the clean reading before we look at any of the commentators, just to see your interpretations before we go in.
I'll get your tissue for you.
So is there anyone who would like to read in English these two verses for me?
I'll read.
Awesome. Go ahead.
Did you call on me?
Yes, go ahead, please. That's Evelyn, right?
Yeah. When Moses sent them to scout the land of Canaan, he said to them, go up there into the Negev and on into the hill country and see what kind of country it is. Are the people who dwell in it strong or weak, few or many?
Great. And yeah, do the next box.
That shall be, continue?
Yeah, keep going.
That shall be your fringe. Look at it and recall all the commandments of the Lord and observe them, so that you do not follow your heart and eyes in your lustful urge.
Great. So just for context, they're talking about the tzitzit and what are they doing there. So they're saying to like look at the fringes of the tzitzit, and this is what it's supposed to do.
Uh-huh.
All right, beautiful. So now that we've read the two verses, what is the object of seeing, of the different kinds of seeing in these two verses? And what are the differences that you see? Go ahead, Ed.
My initial reaction is that one must look in order to see. Looking doesn't always bring understanding and meaningful perception, where seeing goes beyond looking. There's an understanding, there are interpretations, etc. So one goes before the other. But in this case, seeing required Caleb and his buddy to bring back a full description of the country and the people, etc. Looking implies just simply looking, but we know it's more than that in the analysis.
Rabbi Greenberg,
Yes.
in the first part, we are, Bnei Yisrael are asked to look outward to see what the other people are about. And in the second part, we are asked to look inside ourselves, which is a whole different kind of thing.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. So I love that. So, right, it's a lot about, are we looking out? Sorry, if people could just mute themselves when they're not talking, just so we can hear everybody else. So, right, so the first one, Evelyn, beautiful, is about, right, seeing what else is out there. And as we see later in the stories, that can lead to a lot of misinterpretations. And the second text is really saying, like, look at yourself and see where you are right now. Beautiful, thank you. I think I saw Deborah Eiferman with her hand up. Go ahead.
Yes. The first one is an objective view, like a photo. What's there? The second one is not objective. It injects something else, commandments. In other words, it doesn't say, I just want an objective report. I want an objective report with certain prescriptions. So given that, it's not a photo, it's just an interpretive view.
Beautiful, right. So is it objective or is it interpretive? I love that, thank you. Ruth, it looks like you have your hand up, go ahead. And then Ellen. Ruth, you're muted, you have to unmute yourself.
When they lustful urge, do they mean that you should be concentrating on what you're saying and not have sexual urges? Is that what it means?
It certainly,
That would not go together, you know.
right. So it certainly can be. There's these like hilarious stories in the Talmud. The Talmud has some really fun stuff in it, guys, if you haven't dived into it, where a guy is about to have sex with a prostitute and his seat smack him in the face. And basically like remind him like, don't do this. So certainly the rabbis have interpreted it that way in some capacity. But I think in this case, it could just be, in the Hebrew, it's asher atem zonim achareihem. It's like the things that your heart is lusting afterwards. So it could be money, it could be fame, it could be anything that you're sort of desirous of that maybe you shouldn't be. So
Just concentrate on what you're doing.
yeah, I think in this moment it's saying, right, like pay attention to God and what you're doing. Okay, Ellen, and then Alex, I see your hand.
I just wanted to inject a personal story that I think might fit in here.
Sure.
There was a friend of the family who was a psychiatrist, and he was about to rule against a husband in a child custody case. And the husband burst into his office, shot him in the head, and as a result, he became completely blind. Now, two things happened. One reminds me of the first one, and the other reminds me of the second. He immediately stopped seeing patients because he felt if he couldn't see them, he couldn't evaluate them. So he never saw a patient again because he was blind. So he couldn't be a psychiatrist anymore. The second, I noticed when he was in shul and we came to the Shema, he still covered his eyes, even though he couldn't see, which I thought was fascinating. So the first one, he felt he couldn't see, so he couldn't interpret what was out there. The second, even though he couldn't see, he had to focus himself inward to do the Shema, and he still had to, in his own way, block out all of the distractions that he remembered were there. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah, beautiful, very interesting, right? So what does it mean to actually concentrate on ourselves, and how do we get that focus? And for the first one, like, what does our actual sight really give us? And how do we interact with people? Beautiful. All right, Alex, go ahead. I think you were next.
I always thought that Hashem was asking a rhetorical question. The people knew they were going to Canaan, and the Lord had reserved that land for them, whether the people in the land were weak or strong. And whatever the people saw was sort of irrelevant. This is yours, this is being given to you, and don't worry about it. And so when they come back and give their report and then interject their opinion, their fears, Hashem basically is angry. I just wanted you to see this is the land and I am giving it to you, and not to worry. And I think that's my, my interpretation, as, uneducated as it may be. When you overstep.
Wait, Alex, we lost you for a second. Say it again.
Yeah, you overstep your bounds by having fear and not trusting in Hashem.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually exactly what the text believes too, right? As God was saying, just go out and look. This land is good. And that's what Joshua and Caleb say also, right? You promise this land to us. So, and it looks good. So we trust in you, God, that you're going to give it to us. And the rest of the spies don't believe. They are skeptical. And it's exactly their lack of faith, which is why that whole generation doesn't get into the land. All right. Okay, I see Barry, and then unless anyone else has any comments, we'll move on to the commentaries.
Just want to make a more generic comment about sing and how I think it interfaces.
Sure. For a second. Go ahead.
How it interfaces with what people have already spoken about. Life and one's perception of life is not unlike a Rorschach. Each of us brings a different configuration of experiences, motivations, and our emotional life. so that, you can just take something really, forget about Rorschach, just take something that one would think would be easy to describe, objectively. And one might predict that everybody would pretty much describe whatever this is in the same way. What you often find, though, is that's really not the way it works. Again, based on a whole configuration of one's life experience, again, motivations, people will zero in on different aspects of that scene. Some people might just look at one detail. Another person might look at a variety of details and try to put them together into some kind of, integrated picture. So if you think about the spies, to me, it's the two spies that were able to say, okay, let's do it. That surprises me far more than the 10 who said, the risks are great and we're going to be smashed. Because these are people who, despite all the miracles they observed and all the things that God did for them, the larger portion of their lives, they were slaves. And a slave mentality, first of all, a slave mentality has a great deal of difficulty embracing faith. I mean, when you're a slave, there's terrible uncertainty and tremendous fear. So in the terms of the 10 who said their fear overcame any modicum of faith that they may have internalized at that point. And that is not at all surprising to me. It's the 2 who were able to get above and beyond that. That is, they were able to put I'm sure they were fearful also, but they were able to put that aside. And it was faith in God that kind of dominated their final analysis. To me, that's almost miraculous.
Mm. Right. And that's what's interesting about this whole generation is they have gone through so much trauma. How do you try to work through that trauma? How do you try to keep believing in a future that seems positive, and exciting and still has a chance for beauty? So Deborah, I see your hand, so you get the last comment for now, and then we're going to move on to the commentaries.
Even though I did speak, these 2 sentences brought me perfectly to today, what we're going through. We are not seeing faces or smiles. We are no longer responding to body language. A baby responds to smiles. We're not doing that today. And I feel when I'm looking at this, the differences of the 2 sentences is so profound in that we have learned to interpret body language, smiles, faces. We're being deprived of that, and so are our children.
Deborah, whenever I see you, I smile. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it's a beautiful point, Deborah, right, of what we're being deprived of now, and that we can see each other in this venue, but even in the street, I've started to think I kind of smile automatically at people, and I realize they can't see it takes me a while now to realize I have a mask on, and so of course they can't see me smiling. So do you wave? Do you, it's sort of you have to figure out a whole new way to have these sort of small positive interactions with people that you never had to think about before. And also the sense of fear around people, right? So it's trying to remember everyone you're seeing, even if you want to keep 6 feet away from them, they're still human, and you have to remind each other and yourself of that. And it's something I've been really mindful of with my daughter, who's only 2.5, is I felt like in the beginning I kept saying keep away, we have to be here. And I've tried to shift my language to say, to be good neighbors, we have to give people space now. Because I want her to understand we're trying to do this out of love and kindness and not out of fear of each other. And even saying that to her has helped me shift how I'm thinking when I see other people on the street. So yeah, it's very interesting, sort of the mindset and how we see each other and how that can shift. So beautiful. Thank you, Deborah, as always, for bringing us to the present moment. And I see lots of hands now. Sure, Diane. Okay, so let's do this, guys. Diane, Marianne, and Terry, I want you all to talk, but if you could try to keep it short. I would really appreciate it. So Diane, you go first.
Yeah, I will. I was struck by those two words to see if they were strong or weak, because I don't know what the Hebrew is, but if we use the English word strong and weak, if they just assumed that these other people were strong because they were big, that's an assumption that really, when I think about that, you can't always assume that. A small person could be a strong person. A tall person could be a weak person. So those words struck me as something that you just, you assume just because you see a person's physical being.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. All right, Marian, go ahead.
I think when you go and read a book, for instance, you get a different perception than somebody else because you have a different background of experience. And I think that's what really affects how you look at things, because you're bringing whoever you are to that situation.
Yeah.
I think in this case they did, because what did they have as a compass to go by? So they did what they had to do, what they felt like doing emotionally.
Right. Right. And I think that's part of what we'll get to that with the tzitzit, right? Of like how easy it is for our emotions to lead us astray sometimes, right? If like their gut reaction is we're afraid, let's just go with the fear. That does not lead to good things for them and the rest of the people. And, you know, like Barry was saying, like for Caleb and Joshua, I'm sure they were afraid too, but they were able to see this other piece of what was happening that they might have missed otherwise. All right, beautiful. Terry, and then we're going to go on to some commentary.
Okay. Well, I think it's also like when Barry was talking about how the spies had positive things to say, I think it's also a concept of hope. And will you be an optimist or a pessimist about it? And luckily, the spies seem to be more of optimists. So that was positive. But in both of these things, you're taking stock, whether it's outward or inward. You're taking stock of something and deciding how you would act. And I think that we all go on two planes, you know, the outward and the inward. Mm-hmm. So I think that just is, you know, done particularly. The first one is all of society, and then the second one would be every individual taking stock of themselves. And one more thing, when you talked about how do you see and like what do you see and look, a lot of people might see and look with an open mind, and others might decide to only want to reinforce their own worldview. And when they talk about that today in terms of the news, you know, do you watch CNN or do you watch Fox News? And you don't get any other, you're looking but you don't get anything new because it's just, you want to just hear what's going on in your own head.
Right, right. Right, and what do echo chambers when we're just hearing the same opinions over and over do to us? Yeah, beautiful, thank you. And perfect lead-in, thank you, as almost always happens into the commentaries to think about sort of what's the difference between this external and internal. So let's hope my screen cooperates with us this time. And you'll let me know if you don't actually see what you're supposed to be seeing, even if I do. Okay. So I'm sharing it now. Everyone see the source sheet again?
See it.
All right, excellent. So glad when everything cooperates. So I just wanted you to see the same commentator, Sforno, who lived in the 14th century, sort of his take on this two different seeing. And like Terry said, one is really like outward looking about that, you know, as a whole people, and one is much more internal. So I thought it would just be interesting to see how one commentator takes these two verses very differently. And he's not comparing them, which you'll see some other people do later, but I thought it was interesting, so I wanted to share it with you. So if I could have someone, we're going to read both of them. Let me just move this down a little so everyone can see. Okay. We're going to read both of them and then talk about sort of his different approaches to them. So I'm going to ask someone who hasn't spoken yet to see if they will read for us. Miriam, you've been quiet so far. Would you like to read the first one for us? Let me unmute you.
Okay, so can you hear me? Because
yes.
I can't see. All right. So you have to take off the caption. You're unmutable. All right, I'll see if I can read on. There you go. Thank you. If it is mostly populated in open cities or walled cities like fortresses, to find out if the ecological conditions favor successful settlement in cities.
Sorry, just
In
to
other
interrupt you
words-
for a second. Sorry, for 1 second. So often with commentators, it seems like they're in the middle of a thought. So he's commenting on this urei tem, like, what are you looking for? So he's saying you're looking for if it's mostly populated or not. Go ahead, Miriam.
In other words, if sick people would be referred by their physicians to such cities and to such a climate to help them regain their health, they would judge this by the appearance of the inhabitants of such cities, if they appeared healthy, strong, of good posture, etc. They would also observe if the people were numerous, had large families, or if somehow they were few in numbers. Large numbers of people and people looking strong and fit would indicate that the climate was good and favored large-scale settlement.
Beautiful. And I'm going to ask you to just read the second part. So that's his commentary on what are they looking for with the spies. This is his commentary on the tzitzit. Go ahead.
You will see it and you will remember all the mitzvot. You will be reminded that you are God's servants, whose commandments you have accepted, reinforced by oaths known as Allah and Shvu'ah. This reminder will be due to your looking at the fringes that may be viewed as if the king had placed a stamp on your bodies, confirming that the wearer is one of his subjects. After your eyes, to object to the urge of which you put your eyes on.
All right, so that's going back to again, like, what are you doing with your eyes? What's that lust we were talking about before? So yeah, okay, go ahead.
That you lust after them. It diverts your rational souls from the paths of life eternal to the paths of destruction and death.
All right, thank you. Very, very good dramatic reading. So, so yes, this is his take on these two verses and these different forms of seeing. So I'd love to hear what you think what he is saying the purpose of sight is in these two different verses, and what the goal or the hope is from seeing in these two different verses.
I would say that in the
Vivian, I see you. You're next.
Okay.
Go
Can
ahead.
I talk?
Yeah, go ahead, Terry.
Okay. I would say that in the first one, it's it's almost, it's political, it's military, this is our society. What are we going into? What do we need to know about it? It's with less emotion and more just let's find out what this is like, and the fact that they have all these various things. Do they look healthy? If they have good posture, and to get some idea of what the people are like, and then saying, well, if they seem to be having a thriving society, it must be a good place to live, because that is what they were evaluating.
Mm-hmm.
That we have this land, but what will it be like? And I would imagine after having a bad life in Egypt and wandering in the desert, you might not have had too much confidence that you're going to be going into a Shangri-La. So I think that was a very political purpose for that one, while again, the other one is evaluating yourself.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay. Great, right. So, right, this large political purpose, we're categorizing people based on what it means to me and what is it going to mean to, us as a people going in versus thinking about ourselves. Great. Vivian, go ahead. No, yeah, go ahead. You're good.
The first seems to be a suggestion that they're looking for a place within the country to settle that will be propitious to a thriving community. And the second seems to be a personal commandment to, use your eyes well and to remember, obviously, the commandment, which is to, live a proper life.
Mm-hmm. Right.
One is communal, one is personal.
Right. So again, like, what's good communally for us as the people of Israel versus what am I going to do that's good in the world as me, and remembering that. Beautiful. Miriam, go ahead.
Yes, the first one is healthy inhabitants means a healthy habitation. So the Gdolot is a good sign, health and a good place to settle. I'm a little confused about the second one that he presents about the personal in terms of the function of the tzitzit. He brings in terms I had not heard of before, and he makes an analogy that seems to be completely out of the loop. There's no seeming precedent for his point. The reminder will be due to your looking at the fringes that may be viewed as if their king had placed a stamp indicating that the wearer is one of the subjects. Where does this come into the tzitzit, king and subjects? I understand it's an analogy, it just doesn't seem to have any basis in what is presented in the text. And of course, nobody so far seems to comment on, while you're in the midst of lusting after something, whether it's money or sex or whatever, why will you even bother looking at the tzitzit? You could be focused on one thing only, and it's the tzitzit.
Right, so beautiful. So I'll answer the last point and then we'll get back to the metaphor. So I think at least for the rabbis, and again in this story where the tzitzit kind of smacked the guy in the face, is theoretically, if we're talking about sex, that you have to take your clothes off before that happens, and theoretically, hopefully, you're going to see your tzitzit before you finish. You get that far, so hopefully it will remind you. And I think just the physical act of wearing them, right? Like they're underneath your clothes. They're not super comfortable the way that we wear them now. Because people used to wear four-cornered garments, right? They used to wear these tunic things, and therefore it was at the bottom, so they would be on you all the time, so you'd remember. Whereas now they're kind of in this like weird, uncomfortable spot underneath all your clothes, and they don't totally fit because we don't wear square clothes anymore. So maybe it works better now that it's kind of this awkward piece, or maybe it worked better then when they were on all the time. And this metaphor at the end, I was also really struck by, and I would just love to hear other people's thoughts if they have thoughts about what they think this stamp is doing and where this came from. So please think about that. And I saw Matt had his hand up, so Matt is next.
I was going to say very simply, the first one is a thought. You're making an opinion of what you see. And the second one is you've already been told what you should see, and it's basically a remembrance. So it's opinion versus what you're told to do.
Interesting. Right. So then in that way of thinking about it, then there's more of an openness to what the spies, get to see when they go in, versus God saying, like, remember the mitzvot. This is not the act of seeing something new. This is the act of remembering what I told you in the first place. Beautiful. Okay. Marjorie, go ahead.
To me, it looks as if the first one is external and the second one is internal. Going back to my background, the first one says to me, you look at it, and if you have to write a report, you write it as if it's an anecdotal, although it may have some of your interpretation in it. This is what I see, and this is the way I will report it. The second one, you're internalizing and you're applying the commandments and you're reflecting on a lot of things before you're making a report.
No, you're not.
Beautiful. What did you used to do, Marjorie? I don't know.
I was an elementary school principal.
Oh, there you go. So now, yeah, that makes perfect sense. I love that. Thank you for bringing that view in. I appreciate it. Okay, Barry, go ahead.
I'm just going to stay with the second one. I think it's a major comment on gender. I mean, tzitzis is men, not women, suggesting that women do not have to be chronically reminded of their values, including mitzvot and their Jewish values, and also the implication that women are not as lustful as men, and whether that lust is for power, money, or sex. I guess I would challenge that way of seeing things. I think it's addressed to men and not women, and my question would be why?
Yeah, so excellent point. What's interesting is when I was starting to do some research for this, is it seems like, so tzitzit are not, it's not one of those mitzvot that women are exempt from. They actually are allowed to do it, and it seems like until sort of the 1400s that they were, and then it started to be that a lot of rabbis started to say that this was less acceptable to do anymore. So just as a little historical fact, that was really interesting for me to read. But yes, I mean, you could say like a lot of the Torah is really talking mostly just to men, unfortunately. But this is, I like to reread and rethink and put our new eyes on it. So yeah, I think at least from this, if you, sort of take it out of the more sexist context it came out of, that certainly reading this just straight, you could say that this could apply to everyone now, at least, even if they weren't thinking that it was applying to everyone back then.
Good, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. All right, so unless there's any other burning comments, I think we're going to keep going just for time's sake because I want to make sure we get to some of the interesting stuff. Great, so let's keep going.
Yeah, I just think.
So we're going to do, I'm going to mention the C-fray. We're not going to talk about it, but think about it as we're going through. And I kind of put too many sources on this sheet on purpose this time because I felt like it's the last class. I wanted you guys to have stuff you could do on your own. I had a feeling we were going to have a good conversation and not get through all of it. So think of this as recommended reading for after the class, this whole page. But I'll just mention that the C-fray talks about, there's a really interesting way that they read Urei Tem Oto, right? So they saw it is usually talking about, it really is him in Hebrew, but it meaning the tzitzit is how most people interpret it. But the Sifrei, which is a midrash on Numbers, talks about Urei Te Oto, Oto as God, that you're seeing him as God. So it's when you're doing the mitzvot, it's as if you have greeted the face of the divine presence of the Shekhinah. So I thought that was really interesting to think about when we're doing mitzvot, you know, specifically they're talking about tzitzit, but in general, if what we're trying to see actually is to see the face of God. So I thought that was really interesting. Just wanted to share that. So think about that as we keep going. We're not going to dive into that. So now we're going to go to Alan Cook. He's a Reform rabbi that I found who wrote this interesting piece connecting sort of how he sees the difference between the spies and the tzitzit and how they connect to each other. So let's see who else hasn't spoken yet. Marge, you've been pretty quiet. Would you like to read this for us?
Sure. It seems that this Sidra is all about seeing what we choose to see and what we ignore. Caleb and Joshua saw the beauty of the land. The remaining spies could see only obstacles that stood in the way of the Israelites taking possession of the land. And the Israelites themselves, who heard the spies' reports, were blinded by their fear of the unknown, rather than being open to the opportunities that would be afforded to them as they enjoyed freedom in the land that had been promised to their ancestors. By contrast, the tzitzit require us to have our eyes open to appreciate them. And in so doing, we are reminded of God's mitzvot and of the kindness that God showed to us in redeeming us from Egypt. We can go through our lives with blinders before our eyes, refusing to bear witness to God's graciousness towards us. Or we can open our eyes that have been previously been blind and proclaim, okay, you can pronounce that word.
Ashreinu.
Ashreinu. How greatly have we been blessed.
Beautiful, thank you. So how is he connecting the two verses we've been talking about, and what does he think the goal of seeing is in his little piece of commentary? So I'm just gonna ask Irene and Howard, you've been pretty quiet. Do you have anything you'd like to add to the conversation? Here, Howard, you're muted, so just unmute yourself if you want to say something.
I have nothing yet. Thank you.
Okay, great.
I'm not shy.
Okay. Fine to be shy today, no problem. Vivian Weintraub, you've been pretty quiet. Is there anything you would like to add?
They've seen with their eyes, but to evaluate and apply it to yourself, that's a different story.
What do you think? Is it harder? Is it just different?
Apply it to yourself, the strength to interpret, evaluate.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. And Arthur, you've been surprisingly quiet. Is there anything you would like to add? You're just unmuted. Just unmute yourself.
I think the key is his use of the word blinded, that the rest of the spies were blinded by their fear, or they wore blinders. They only saw obstacles, so they were blinded. Similar to what Ellen's anecdote before, whereas the tzitzis are requiring the opposite of blindness. Open your eyes, see them, appreciate them, be reminded. Tzitzis are a reminder. The word reminder comes in a lot of the paragraphs in the previous pages. Reminder, reminder, reminder. That's what that seeing and perception is. and the other one is either you're blind or you're open to perception. So I think blindness is the key to understanding Rabbi Cook.
Yeah, right. Right. So what do we sort of go through life not wanting to see, and what are we open to see, and what do we need reminders of, and what sort of feels new and interesting for us? Okay, so I see Diane, go ahead.
It just occurred to me that with tzitzis, you don't only know that you have them by seeing them, you can feel them. So when you put them on, take them off, or just during the day, you can feel them and know them. Whereas looking at the land from afar, you're not touching it, they're not touching you. It's purely your eyes seeing it. But tzitzis is even more of a reminder because they can be seen and felt.
Beautiful, right. So what does it happen to us when it's multi-sensory? That's sort of stimulating what we're thinking and what we're doing. Great. I thought, Marion, you had a hand before. Did you have a hand up?
Me?
I did.
Marion, yeah. Did you have something you want to say?
Yes. I just wanted to expand a little bit on Barry's comments on the slave mentality. He seems also to be suggesting that we can go through our lives with blinders before our eyes. In other words, expressing or experiencing the slave mentality of being fearful of the future because we're fearful of the present because we have no agency, and that we can't deal with change very easily as a result, or become aware of our environment as a result. So all of us, or at least those of us who go through our lives with blinders, in a sense are slaves to our fears and all that which constrains us. The way the slaves were. That's probably why you needed someone like Moses, who was not a slave and who was raised as an entitled individual, was able to lead them out. And why you have so few, if any, maybe Wat Tyler, who come from the actual slave population to lead them in a revolution or a revolt or to freedom.
Right. Right. A beautiful point, and I'd love to talk about that if anyone wants to add in. Like, I think the reason I love this little commentary is I think it really does speak to us. Like, when have we, and we've all done both of these, right? We've all gone through life at some point with blinders, not being able to appreciate anything that's happening to us, not being able to appreciate God's wonder in the world. And we've all gone through points in our life where we've been able to see, like, wow, how beautiful everything is, how amazing everything is. So if anyone wants to share, and I imagine that this time of Corona has been maybe all of one or all of the other or a mixture of both. So if anyone wants to share sort of how this has struck you personally, it certainly like hit a personal chord with me. So feel free to share that. So Terry, I know you're next. And then Erica, it looked like you were nodding and you haven't spoken yet. So if you want to think about something to say, let me know. Okay,
Well,
go ahead, Terry.
What struck me is that when they talk eyes that have previously been blind, this is the well-known hymn Amazing Grace. And the whole point of that is how sweet it is to save a wretch like me. I once was blind and now I can see. So somehow, you know, like being with God, having people be good to the person opened up their eyes. And obviously it's, you know, from these passages, perhaps.
Right. Right. Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I was thinking about that too. Evelyn, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering why tzitzit are only mandated for men.
So they weren't actually only mandated for men. It was one of those mitzvot that women could do, and it seems like they participated in for a long time. But then it was a shift around the 14th century that they stopped.
Yeah, what happened in the 14th century?
And it's not only that one wears tzitzit. If you are in a community where others are wearing tzitzit and you look at the people around you, that's also a reminder.
Right, right. So I would say, you know, certainly in our community, right, we wear a talit. That's our like form of wearing tzitzit, right? And at least in our community, I certainly wear a talit. There are many, many women who do. So I think it is a mitzvah that sort of has been retaken on by a lot of women in the 20th and 21st century, thankfully. And right, it matters who else is around you. And I think that goes back to the seeing, right? So as a teenager, when I was the only girl at camp who brought my talit with me, I was extremely self-conscious about what that meant. And as a teenager, you're always self-conscious anyway. But certainly if you're the only one, it makes it worse. And if I could have seen someone else, I would have felt better. And then when I was working as a counselor, when I was older, I purposely wore it because I wanted the girls to see it. And I wanted them to know that girls could also wear talit. That felt important to me. At a camp where that wasn't so true. So I think a lot of this, yeah, I think that ties in a lot to the seeing. There's a great quote, I think, from Sally Ride, who was an astronaut. The girls can't be what they can't see, and how important it is to just see people in professions or doing things that you wish they were doing. And certainly there's a lot of conversation around that now with the Black Lives Matter movement also, right? That Black people are not getting into positions of power, then it's another form of the oppression that's happening. So thank you for that comment, Evelyn. All right, I see Barry, and then we're gonna go on to I see Suzanne actually first, because Suzanne hasn't spoken yet. Sorry, Barry, hold on one second. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Taking this to the present and with
Please.
the COVID, am I unmuted?
Yes, you are, go ahead.
Okay. Being that we are still very much in the unknown, one of the things that helps me every single day is to be able to go out and look at what is growing. This is a sign of hope. And then I heard a good humor truck. I mean, that was like a symphony. Now I'm waiting to see the children back in the parks. And I know this will be good.
Beautiful, thank you, Suzanne. And I have to say, I was thinking about that too when I was reading these texts, and we're gonna read a poem to sort of wrap up. Just talking about like, what does it mean to actually notice what's happening around you? And I have found I am much more aware of what plants are, what flowers are blooming, what plants are sprouting. Anytime I hear kids laughing outside from my window, I hear the birds chirping a lot more often. The playground where Maya usually goes is completely covered in green now. It's like sprouted out of all these interesting places. And there's something really beautiful about that. And to take the moment on, the quick amount of time we're allowed to go outside now to just say like, wow, the world is still a really beautiful place. It can be very important and very grounding. It certainly has been for me. So I'm glad it has been for you. All right, so Barry and Sabina quickly, and then we're gonna go on to the poem. I'm gonna stop screen sharing for a second just so we can see each other, and then we'll go on to the poem. All right, so go ahead, Barry.
The imagery that kind of dominates my consciousness about this parsha is the giant and the grasshopper. And it's not as if the inhabitants of the land proclaim to these, 10 spies that you all look like grasshoppers. That was a self-perception. They saw themselves as grasshoppers. Now, when you think of the difference between giants and grasshoppers, that is classical shame imagery. That is, and shame has to do with really a sense of inadequacy. So the question is, what, if that makes any sense, I mean, what do these 10 spies feel were their inadequacies? And I think that could probably be traced back to their lives as slaves. People who have experienced slavery during their lives are shameful about those experiences and see themselves as inadequate, impotent, ineffective.
Right, and again, I think so that goes to, what did Joshua and Caleb have that enabled them to overcome that, and are, sort of those seeds of resilience are in all of us, and do we have people who help us cultivate them? Do we have people who see them? Do we have people who acknowledge it in them to sort of help it grow? Beautiful. Okay, Sabina, go ahead. You just have to unmute yourself.
Just to go back and sort of reiterate what Suzanne said, what you took for granted before, I mean, you're noticing now because so much more is lacking, or so much more is restricted. Am I muted or unmuted?
No, I hear you, yeah. That you're saying that it's because so much more is restricted, we can see more.
When we were in Riverdale, or we're here now, when I was taking the dog out for walks, I'd have my camera and just stop and take pictures of flowers and this and that. Where before maybe, okay, I was saying this, but maybe I didn't stop so much. Just getting out. When we were in Riverdale, I made sure we got out every day for like 2.5 miles. Here, Alex and I have planted a garden. We actually got it in on time, and it's neat this year because we're taking advantage of what we took for granted before. Is just little things now matter,
right,
that you didn't think about before all the restrictions came in place.
Right. And I think it's right, like Deborah Eiferman was saying before, right? Like even just smiling at people and having that, the body language that we can't even do anymore because we physically have masks on. Right. It's all the little things. that made our lives so rich that we didn't even realize we're making them rich before all of this hit. And we'll sort of be so rich as maybe we start to get back into things, right? Even just, I haven't seen so many people walking on the street, but I ran into Mason the other day, and we stayed far apart from each other, but even just to see his face in person after Zooming with him for 3 months was like such a pleasure after so long. So yeah, it's all the little things we'll hopefully get back to at some point. Okay, Arthur, I see you, but I really want to do this poem, so I want to do the poem really quick, and then I'll get to you, just in case anyone has to go at 12. So just want to do this poem quickly that I thought just hit on these nice points. I love poetry, so it felt like I couldn't teach this class without at least bringing in one poem once. So Mary Oliver, very famous poet, a lot of you may have heard of her, so I love all her stuff. But because it's summer and this seemed very poignant, I wanted to bring this poem called The Summer's Day. So Erica, I know you didn't want to speak, but would you be willing to read for us, since you have a beautiful reading voice?
No, but I'll read anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
Oh.
Beautiful.
Beautiful, Erica. Thank you. So I'm glad lots of resounding beautifuls, that you appreciate this as much as I do. But I thought this really just spoke to a lot of the things we were talking about what does it mean to just stop and see, and to see the beauty in the world. Her description of this grasshopper I just thought was so beautiful. And like, if you stop and actually look at a grasshopper, there's a lot to see. And I love this piece about how prayer for her, and I think, often I feel like for me, in the spontaneous prayer, is just being wherever you are, right? Seeing those flowers, seeing the playgrounds, seeing whatever it is that sort of grounds you, and reminds you of your wild and precious life. So yeah, so Arthur, I'll give you the last official comment. I'll do a little closing, and then I'm happy to stay on to talk to anybody else.
I am just wondering, and maybe Howard can or someone else can help me on this. Is there a medrash that talks about the composition of the spies, the makeup? Was there a cross section of older men and younger men? And is it conspicuous that Joshua and Caleb maybe were younger than the others?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, not that I know of either. I think they're all around. I mean, they certainly have to be around the same age, because that, then God says your whole generation, whatever the generation means, is going to be wiped out because of it. So it seems like they're all of similar age, but I have not seen a midrash saying they're of drastically different ages.
But it's possible, going to Barry's statement before, that Joshua and Caleb didn't have that shame of being slaves, of growing up as slaves, because they were younger. And maybe these other scouts, because they were slaves, they had a different perception of what they were seeing. Just thinking out loud.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, certainly it's possible there could have been an age difference. I think they were all slaves. Whether Joshua maybe was a kid at that point, like, we don't exactly know. But yeah, certainly an interesting point how age could play into all of this, and how we see and what we choose to see and not see. So I just want to, I'm going to put in my last two comments, and then I'm happy to stay and listen to everyone else in case anyone has to leave now. But yeah, so thank you for looking at this with me. I think I didn't even realize I was saying that, but I think it's interesting to see, to think about how do we see the world and how do we perceive the world, and especially right now, are we focusing on everyone looking like grasshoppers and all the scary and big and terrifying things that are out there that we have no control over? Or are we trying to take those moments to see the plants and the flowers and all the beautiful things like Mary Oliver was talking about, and just sort of seeing the beauty that is still in the world. And, as Deborah said in our first class together that I had with you, sort of seeing what could be beautiful that comes out of this moment, which can be really hard sometimes. So I imagine a lot of us kind of go between these two ways of seeing kind of the doom and gloom in the world and everything that's terrifying, and trying to still appreciate the beauty and the joy and the creation that could be coming out of all of this. So I hope for you that you have moments like Mary Oliver, where you're able to sort of see the beauty and sort of the tzitzit kind of moments where you're focusing on what is beautiful and still good in the world. And it has been a pleasure learning with you. This has been super, super fun for me. I've enjoyed putting this class together every week and learning with all of you. And you always have such interesting and insightful comments. It's really been a joy. So thank you very much. And I look forward to whatever the summer iteration of this is. Again, feel free to send me or Rabbi Katz an email about what exactly you might want that to look like. And yeah, have a beautiful summer until I see you all next on Zoom, which hopefully will be soon. And again, happy to stay on and talk to anyone afterwards.
Could there be a chance that we meet next Wednesday?
Probably not next Wednesday. I think we're going to do a little bit of a break, and then we'll figure out what the next iteration looks like.
Can I just say one?
I just want to thank everyone and for being part of the class. And Rabbi, thank you. And certainly what you've done and these classes have certainly made this quarantining a lot better and given us a lot of thought and personally hope. And I really thank you very, very, very much.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
Ditto.
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 Yes, I agree. Can I just say one thing?
Of course, Erica. Thank you. Thank you all. Erica, go ahead.
Skipped over Matt Berkowitz, and
I did.
He's an amazing, wonderful rabbi. He's a role model for all of us. He was my husband's student. When my husband retired, he made, I don't know if you can see it, this is a copy. The original is around the corner here, on a Mishaberach. And he's a very soft-spoken, very genteel, wonderful, oh, here you go. Do you see that? And here's the original. Whoops. I should put on the light. Did it come out? No, I can't see what I'm showing you. But that's the original.
It's a little tilted, but you can see it.
Yes, but it's a Mishaberach, and it was he did it for Joe, and there are copies around also. But I just urge everyone, if you're in Israel, he has a gallery together with David Moss of the Moss Haggadah, and they do amazing creative artistic works based on text. So I just think that you might want to see that.
Yeah, beautiful. I would say
you
I
know
love.
What? We can look online because I don't know if anyone's getting to Israel pretty soon.
Oh, they have, yes, and they
Thank you.
have. You're right. They have a website. You can look up at David Moss because he's the more famous. He has two galleries.
Okay.
David Moss and Rabbi Matt Berkowitz, he's getting married, by the way, for those of you who know him. He's remarrying the woman who's our rental agent. So
Yeah, so I would say I love Matt, and I'm sorry we had to skip over that text. Please read it. It was beautiful. Again, it's like what inspired this whole thing for me. And he has done, Matt also made a beautiful Haggadah. If you want an interesting thing to add to your Haggadah collection, he did his own prints and interpretations of everything, and it's definitely one that I like to use. And especially since you all like to look at pictures, I have noticed, and different art when we're doing analysis, it's definitely something wonderful to add to your Passover collection.
Yeah.
So
yes. There are a museum that it's on his artwork.
Hi, Sabina and Alex. Yeah, does anyone else have anything they want to add or share thoughts at the end of the class, even though we're officially done? If there's anything else you still want to say, Suzanne, go ahead.
I don't know if I missed something because the bell rang. I thought it was the phone. I want to thank you for the work you're putting into it, and you're really bringing things to life. In fact, I bought the 2 books that were mentioned last week.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so thank you very, very much, and continue it. That's what I would like.
Yes, I agree. It's
You're
amazing.
very welcome.
I very much appreciate the other people's comments. They have really enriched us, and that's because you make it such an open space for everyone to participate and to think outside the box. I think it's great.
Thank you. And yeah, I always like to say I love teaching because I learn more from everything that everyone I'm learning with, brings to the table than when I'm doing all of my preparation. So I feel like the text really only comes alive when we're all in conversation with each other. So thank you for all the beautiful comments you have made.
Yeah, Rabbi Greenberg, I personally like speaking and hearing you talk about the Parsha. So if this continues during the summer, I think focusing on each week's Parsha is most meaningful for me.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good to know.
Focusing on the Parsha and how, but not just on the Parsha, but how it plays out in our lives today.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have watched some of the recordings of Rabbi Katz teach, and I know both of us, certainly that's very important for us to figure out how it's relevant to everyone's lives today. So we will continue to do that, whatever it is that we teach, but it likely will be the Parsha.
Good.
The David Moss Haggadah on Amazon is only $198.
Oh, well, I know Matt Berkowitz's is not that much, at least from when I bought it. So hopefully.
Are you talking about the level Haggadah or a different one? Rabbi Greenberg.
The Moss Haggadah by David Moss.
Yes, right. That's the one. But Rabbi Greenberg also mentioned
Matt Berkowitz's. I don't remember what he called it, but
the level, because they were the people who sponsored it.
Yes.
You can also buy the Stender that Moss designed. For
yeah.
Like what, 35,000 something. I told Rabbi Katz if we make $1 million one day, we'll give most of it to the shul and we'll buy a Stender for them.
Wow, that is quite the expensive Stender.
Win the lottery.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Arthur, for looking it up.
Arthur, is the Stender on Amazon?
No. How do you spell Stender?
Or you go to the David Moss website.
I think it's out of my budget.
What is David Moss? Just look up David Moss, and he has a website.
I imagine it's out of all of our budget range, but
Right.
Oh, here, the level Haggadah, I'll put the
He was a
link
client
from
of mine.
Amazon in, is only $35. So yeah, just put the link in the chat if anyone wants to see.
If you need 10 of them for a Seder. It's
Well, at least what I do with Haggadot is I have the kind of standard one that I use with everyone, and then I have a bunch in the middle that people can sort of pick up and choose, or I'll pick up and do certain things out of. So I don't have 10 or 12 of Matt's, but he's one of my like extra ones that I do stuff with. Alrighty. Anyone else have anything else they'd like to say? It's so sweet all that all of you stayed on. Tilda, do you want to say anything? You've been very quiet.
She's muted.
Muted.
I know. I'm asking to unmute you if you would like to be unmuted, Tilda.
Hi, Tilda.
Hello.
There she is.
Here's Tilda. Hello.
Ah,
There she is.
There I am.
Good to see her.
Good.
Anything you want to add to the conversation, Tilda?
No, thank you.
Okay.
I'm glad to see everybody, and I hope to see you all back in shul again in the classroom when this whole problem is over and we can all get together and sit together and enjoy each other's company.
Amen.
Amen.
Ditto. Here's the Stender. It's absolutely beautiful. But why does it's got, I'll post, where's it tells you all that's in it, but how much is it? It doesn't say how much it is. I'm sorry. But I'm sure you can, wait. It includes every ritual object that you could ever need. And it doesn't have the price. I'm sorry. I'm
okay.
sorry.
I don't think any of us are buying it, Irene.
It's SHTEND